Hello everyone, my name is Tuex. This is part 2 and also can be a standalone dojo class for brave newbies. This is going to be importing 101. So in this class, what we're going to be doing is how do you import items? How do you get them into Brave space? Best ways of going and buying them and getting them here, as well as some general ways of trying to import items. What items do you want to pick? What are good items? What are bad items? And then how to protect yourself just in case you buy certain items that maybe go out of style. So you end up making a ton of money instead of losing a ton of money. This whole process is really easy. It can be very easily scaled. So you can start really small with like a couple million ISK and take your journey all the way up to billions and billions of ISK. So as we get started, my name is Tuex. I've been a member of Brave Newbies and playing Eve off and on for about 5 or 6 years now. One of my main sources of income is playing with the market and primarily importing. At any one time, I have 10 to 20 billion ISK of items on the market with 100 plus orders. If you're curious about the market in general, go ahead and take a look at the previous video that should be posted right around the same time as this for Market 101. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to be doing in here that is already explained in that class, so I'll probably be moving through it pretty quickly. There will be a little bit of redundancy in here, particularly looking through like the price graphs and stuff, so bear with me as we get through that. So first of all, what is importing? Importing is bringing items from a region or station that is not your current station, buying them there, and hauling them to the new station to sell. If you're looking at building locally, you want to look towards production, trying to buy minerals so that you can produce locally. You're going to get better profit margins doing that. But for this, with very minimal skills, you can make a whole bunch of ISK. So my journey, I started doing this a while ago, probably a year and a half ago is when I really got into it. I started with probably about 50 million ISK that I ground up from just ratting around in a Vexor Navy issue at the time. And I have grown it to, I generally have about 10 to 20 billion ISK on the market. I have multiple accounts now supporting this. I've bought my own jump freighter, which helps on cost a lot, but you don't have to have a jump freighter for this to work. I definitely did not have that to start with. So let's just jump into it. So identifying an item that you want to bring in. All of this is well and dandy. If you don't have an item that you can't bring in, then you're not going to make any money. So probably the easiest way to do this, especially in Brave, is to open up a website that has been made, and I think other people have it too, but it's called Eve Market Watch. If people are getting into importing, this is typically where you get pointed to. So it's just evemarketwatch.com. When you first log into it, this is all going to be empty. And what you'll want to do is in the middle, log into your Eve account because it pulls ESI data in order to check permissions and make sure that you can see all this. And then in the middle here, this is going to be empty. You want to hit Show My Markets and hit Alliance, and it'll give you the markets that they have set up in here. So today we're going to be focusing on our main staging, our home system, GE TAC 8. So you'll click on that, and it'll default over here to private. And so it'll look like this, and you want to click on Alliance. Once you get to Alliance, you can see the thresholds that they've set up. It'll show current volume, the threshold that they want it to be at, and the order types and all that, and the item types. So we're going to go ahead and just hide the items with green volumes, but those could still be really good items to bring in. The idea behind this is going to be all of our doctrine ships and our doctrine items that we're always using. So these are going to be typically high volume items for the most part, although some of them are deceiving. So we want to check this in game as well later. So for example, 1400 howitzer artillery 2s. The threshold on market is 210, and there's currently 53. So this gives us an idea of, hey, this might be a great item to bring in. So half the battle is figuring out what items to be looking for. So one way is this. One way is going through the corporation fittings and taking a look at the corporation fittings and checking the market. Another really, really good way is just being around and being online. If you're in the Indie Bros public channel on Slack, a lot of the time new doctrines will kind of get pushed there first, saying, hey, start bringing this in or start producing this. That is going to give you a head start on everybody else. But everybody can go and see that if they're interested, as long as they're in Brave. And then another good way is going out on a lot of these fund fleets. A lot of the fund fleets that we run have their own doctrines, which aren't going to be in the corporation fitting. For example, one of the ones that I brought up is the attack scrolls, which is run out of Incredible. So one thing that I noticed when I was joining the fleet was that some of the items weren't on the market, or there's very few on the market, and everybody was like, well, I can't get this. And even though they were handing out the ships, especially these cheaper fun fleets are going to be handing out these ships, a lot of people like to buy their ships and have them for themselves so they don't have to trade it back at the end. So if you have these items in the market, they might sit there for like a week or two, but as soon as a fleet goes out, they're all going to sell out, and then you just bring in the next batch. Also, if you see, hey, right now we have a skilling spree. Everybody's buying T1 frigates and cheap fit frigates in order to blow up. So the volume on those is going to be a lot higher. And so that might be something that a margin wasn't there before, but now it's going to be here again. So let's walk through just trying to find an item. So I've deleted out a bunch of the rest of the fit here. But one of the things that I noticed, this is that attack squirrel one, was the energy neutralizers weren't on market. So if I go here and click view market details, I can see this small energy Nosferatu is not here, and that's something that I know people are going to be buying. Small energy neutralizer 1 is not here. And then for the T2 version, which is in the T2 fit, there's very few. So this would be an indication that there might be a hole in the market for you to bring in items. So before we go and do that, though, we want to make sure that there's actually some sort of movement and volume to back this up. We don't want to get stuck bringing in an item that is just going to sit on market forever and never sell. So the way that we're going to do that, we're going to go into our price history tab and just take a look at the volume. So as we can see here, there's quite a bit of volume. Even though there's nothing on the market, or there's 3 items on the market, we're seeing, this is probably when a fleet went out. This is probably when a fleet went out. You can see a whole bunch of items. So we got 49 as our quantity here, 35, 44. So you can see the spikes here as people use them. And this is also just a basic T2 module that people are going to be using in their standing fleet fits a lot, especially the smaller frigates and destroyers and stuff like that. So it's a cheaper item. It's at 2.9 million ISK, and we're going to go through and look at is this worth bringing in. So we've established that there's a volume, there's a need here, there's a hole for the market. If we expand our time, we can see that there's been a demand for this pretty consistently. One thing that you do have to look out for is on doctrine fits. We might have a doctrine that we use all the time. So let's say that we had a MOA doctrine. And so we were always taking out MOAs, and those were fit a certain way. And well, we stopped using the MOAs, or we stopped calling for them, or they just went away altogether. And then you get stuck with all these items that aren't used on any other doctrines. So that is something that you do. There is a certain level of risk. If we're using them for stratops and they're being lost, there's going to be a demand there. And there's going to be a demand pretty consistently. But if the meta shifts and then we start using caracals, all of your MOA guns, they're not going to be used anymore, or the ships themselves. So now that we've established that there is a volume and a need for this item, we're going to go ahead and take a look and see if it's worth bringing in. So one thing that you have to keep in track of is what are you buying your item for, and what are all the fees and associated costs with getting it into catch in particular. So open this up. So the formula that you kind of want to get a hold of is right in the middle here. So we're going to buy our items out of JITA for this case. You can also buy them out of Amar. JITA just typically has the best situation. For importing, the more effort you put in, the more money you get out. So if you want to be lazy, buy things out of Amar, contract them directly to the freight service and bring them in, you're still going to make money, but you're not going to make as much money if you buy them from JITA, have a public contractor haul it over to Amar or Midori and bring it in that way. So one thing that you want to keep track of is what you're buying it, there's a JITA sell, and then you want to add on your broker's fee and your sales tax and your shipping cost. Now this part is really important, and you're going to have to figure this out for yourself to figure out kind of what is your actual shipping cost. It's going to change based on the volume that you bring in. If you bring in low volume, your cost might be higher. Typically the way that the jump freighter contracts are set up is it rewards full loads, which is about 300,000 meters cubed. That's your price per meter cubed is going to be a lot lower versus if you're bringing in like 10,000 meters cubed. So one thing that you can do is play around with the calculators that we're going to show in a little bit and figure out kind of what an idea is. I think I used to use, when I didn't have my own jump freighter, around 1,200. So for our example, just to make things easier, let's say that we have an item that costs 100,000 ISK and it's 5 meters cubed. So we have our JITA sell price at 100,000 ISK. Our broker's fee, which we can see in our market order. If you're in the system that you're at and you can open up your market orders, it'll be at the bottom of this here, and it'll say our base broker fee is 3% and our sales tax is 2.8. So that's what I'm going to be using here. So this is a percentage, so you want to make sure that it is adjusted appropriately. As you can see, I didn't do that on the first one. So we have 100,000 times 3%. Plus 100,000 times 0.28, so 2.8%. And then we have our meters cubed and our shipping cost. So our total cost, our break-even cost that we want to keep track of is 164,000 ISK. So if the item in catch is less than that, then we're not going to make any profit. After it gets above that, we can start calculating our percentage of profit, which is an easy way of just seeing, instead of, oh, I'm going to make 50,000 ISK on this, I'll make 10 or 20%. A good percentage range is going to be, if it's something that's moving all the time, you can stay on top of your orders. A 5% is going to make you a lot of money. But if it is something that isn't going to be moving a lot, it has low volume, a 5%, you might be sitting on it for a while, and there's always a risk that somebody's going to come in and undercut you, and then your item isn't going to sell. So on slower moving items, you want to build in a little bit of a buffer there. Anywhere from 10, 20, 30% is good. Typically, if you're stocking a market in Brave, try and keep it around 20%. People get really touchy if you overcut or you inflate your prices a lot. You are filling a hole, you are taking a risk. You kind of got to decide that on your own. People are going to complain about it if it's too expensive, and then they will promptly be told, hey, if it's that expensive, bring it in yourself. So welcome to this video. But, we're all friends here. We don't really support too much like shady market PvP. Some of the rules that we have are you can't buy out an item and relist it. So there's only 3 items here. Say I was bringing in 20 items, right? I wouldn't be allowed to buy this out and relist it at 5 million and inflate the market. That is something that is frowned upon, and it can actually get you kicked out of Brave. There are people that don't quite understand how the market works, and they'll try and undercut it, but typically the market is going to work itself out. Assuming somebody isn't paying attention and then somebody undercuts, and they have one item and it's listed at 0 profit. Somebody's going down their order list, they update it, and now there is a large volume of items listed for negative profit. They're not making money on it, nobody else is going to make money on it, and then the item category dies, which is good to keep track of those items, because eventually either that market will sell out and nobody else is bringing it in, and then you have a market hole. So that's one of those things that you see a lot. And also when you're bringing in items and you're bringing in something to undercut it as close as possible. It used to be 0.01 ISK was the closest that you could do, but now we have 4 significant figures, which I was explained in the Market 101 class. But essentially that means the first 4 digits here on the left are going to be the ones that are controlling the price. So if you wanted to undercut this price, you would do 2,989,000, and that would be your new price. So that is also something that you have to keep track of when you're bringing in stuff. If your break-even price is 164,000 here, but there's one that's listed for 162,000, or 166,000, you're only 1 or 2 order modifications from being out of money. So be careful with those razor thin margins. You will end up losing money on them if there is not, if you have to keep relisting it, especially if it's a high volume. For example, adaptive and vulnerability shield 2s. Those used to be a great money maker. I could bring in 500 of them. I'm only making 3% profit, but before the broker changes and the modification fee changes, I could sit there and relist them all the time. But now I can only relist them once or twice before my profit margin dies. Another thing that you want to be careful with now is with the modification. When you go to modify your order, if you go to undercut it, you're now paying this broker's fee. Just keeping track of an idea of how many times you've undercut a market. The broker's fee is calculated based on the number of items that you have and the skills that you have in advanced broker relations. Here, there's a good explanation here on how it works, and search for the dev blogs that explain the formula for this. Is going to be your best bet for trying to figure this out if you're building your own spreadsheets. Okay, so back to small energy neutralizers. Now that we've identified the item, what we want to do is see the price of the item. So using some of our market tools, probably the easiest way to do this is going to be Eve Appraisal. And the market, the links for some cool tools are down in the bottom here if you can read them. We have Eve Appraisal, Eve Market Watch, Eve Marketer to check the item. So let's do this small energy neutralizer 2, and we're going to look up the JITA price. So the JITA price on this is the JITA sell. So if you want to make more money, going back to the lazier you are, the less money you're going to make. If you want to set up a buy order in JITA and be on top of that and maintain it, your profit margin is going to be much higher because you can buy it for 1.8 mil instead of 2.2 mil. So you're just going to make more money off of that. So for this purpose, we're just going to base it on the sell. So we have a 2.2, which means if it's up at 3 million and the volume is 5, we're going to make some money on this, which is going to be great. Another thing to keep track of is have an alt in JITA that you're going to be buying everything off of. And if it also check perimeter as well for some items, you can get a deal on them because of the sales tax. Sometimes people list them lower, particularly with Plex, but don't haul Plex. And so now, and when you're looking at it for like stuff that isn't manufactured. So for example, this compact afterburner, essentially if it doesn't have a 1 or a 2 at the end, people aren't going to be able to manufacture it and it's going to be dropped. There is a chance that when you buy this in JITA, if you buy 100 of these items, you're going to kind of wreck the market, because if it is a lower drop rate item, they're not going to have that in stock. And so your profit it might be 24,000 ISK in JITA, and you buy 10 of them, and now it's 100,000 ISK. So that's something to keep track of, especially on the meta modules that aren't being manufactured by people. So say we've bought our item in JITA. We've established that we want this item, the energy neutralizer 2. And we're going to go ahead and bring it in. As I accidentally open all of my notes. And we've established that we want to bring it in. So how do we get it to catch? There are multiple ways to bring it in. If you buy it in a MAR, you can contract it directly to the Brave jump freighting service directly from a MAR. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than Midori, but it's going to be a lot more convenient. There are some of us that only go to a MAR. A lot of people that own jump freighters also have their own side stuff that they're bringing stuff in, and they typically go to the markets. But there are quite a few people that only do hauling from Midori. So just take a look at the prices and figure out what works for you. If you buy it in JITA, what you want to do is once you buy it, you're going to want to move it to either a MAR or Midori. So in order to do that, and you can do it remotely too. So let's say, imagine that this is in JITA. What you're going to do is you go to your asset window, or if you're in system with it, you can right click on it and you want to create a contract. And this is a courier contract. So this is how you set up courier contracts. In the contract type, you're going to select courier. When you're doing high sec moving, you're going to set it up as a public. There are some Brave high sec corps, but for the most part, people in high sec will move items for pennies, especially if it's between like JITA and Amar. So you might save money on that portion of the leg and spend a little bit more money on the jump freighter portion, or move it all the way to Midori. Typically, the rule of thumb is if you're paying 500,000 ISK per jump, it's going to move really quick. Anything more that you put, it's going to be moving a lot faster. When I go from JITA to Amar myself, I will list the item at 1 million ISK per jump, and that will get the item pretty much moved instantly. You'll also want to link it in the haulers channel. So it's just a channel. If you go to social chat channels, and it's just haulers channel, and hit join, and you'll be joined into the haulers channel. You can toss your contracts up there, and people will move it a lot faster. So when you create your contract, we have courier and public. If you're moving a lot of items and you're sitting there in system, you can't create, it's much easier to select here and create a contract this way, and then select any additional ships that you might want, versus selecting it through this screen. You can select it through this screen if you want. Keep track of your total volume here. And then for a rule of thumb, for moving stuff in high sec, try and keep it under 60,000 meters cubed. 60,000 meters cubed is a break point for deep space transports, which a lot of people use. It's a lot faster way of transporting stuff. You can transport a couple billion ISK at a time and not really be much of a target, versus a freighter, which you're kind of stuck around 1 billion to 2 billion ISK, depending on how many cargo expanders you have. So your items are going to be moved a lot faster if you're at 60,000. And if somebody is in a freighter, they can grab multiple of your 60,000, and then it'll move all at once too. So once you've selected your items that you want to move, you hit next, and then ship to. And here you're going to put the station that it's going to be going to. You're going to put your reward, which is going to be that 500,000 ISK per jump for high sec. For the jump freighter contracts, we'll go through that in just a second, but that's going to be calculated based off of the calculator. And then your collateral. When you're moving stuff through high sec, one thing that you want to keep track of is the price of the item in where you buy it versus where you sell it. So if I was making a courier contract based off of one of these here, I would want to make sure that my collateral price was over this 2.22 million. Typically, you want to inflate it 10, 20%. That way, if anything goes wrong, they lose the contract, they fail it, or they try and take it, you're going to get your money back. You can just repeat the process, and you made a little bit of money on the side. If you're moving stuff in high sec, you want to check to where you're moving it to as well. So since we're going to be moving it to a MAR, 2.58 million. So if we were to list it at 2.5 million as our collateral, somebody could get to a MAR, they could open up the package and be like, you know what, I'm just going to keep this because I can sell it here for more. So always check where you're buying it and where you're selling it, and make sure that your collateral is set appropriately. When you're creating a Brave Little Toaster contract, just do GDA plus 10%. Expiration, depending on how many days you have, I normally do about 3 days, and then days to complete, I do 1 day. That way I know it's as soon as they accept it, they have 1 day to do it. Otherwise, they're going to fail it. And then I get my money back and I can redo it. If you give them multiple days, they might just sit on it, and nobody likes that. Description, you can add a description if you want to. And then once you hit next, it'll pop up with a confirmation. Make sure when you hit that next button and go to the confirmation, your collateral and reward are set correctly and they're not reversed. After that, you'll hit finish, and then it'll pop up into your contracts, and you can toss it over into the haulers channel. So now that we have it in a MAR or Midori, what we want to do is plug it into the get it into catch. So we're going to use the Brave jump freighting service. So we're going to do freight.bravecollective.com. You do not have to be in Brave to use the Brave jump freighting service. It will get flagged on our end, on the hauler's end, if you're not in it, but as long as everything is set up correctly, it should work fine. Sometimes, like today, the website's going to be down, so we're just going to have to go without for the purposes of this. Inside this calculator, what there'll be is it'll ask you, where are you shipping from? Where are you shipping to? If you're in a hub, it's going to be a little bit better of a price. If you're trying to ship to a non-hub, so if you wanted to ship to YHN, which is next door to GE, it's going to be more expensive because you have to pay for the cost for them to move it to YHN, because they might not have other contracts going there as well. Typically, GE is going to be cheaper. PSEMA will be more expensive. ZXIC probably more expensive than both of those. So you'll plug in the volume that you have. You'll plug in up to, I think it's 300,000 or 320,000 is the max that a jump freighter can hold. So if it's over that, you're going to have to split it up into multiple contracts, and then you'll enter your collateral. It's very important that you enter the correct collateral that you're going to be using, GDA plus 10%. Even though Brave Little Toasters does have rules that are going to prevent us from stealing it from you, if somebody accepts it and they notice that your contract isn't correct, they can fail it back and send it back to you and just contract it for the cost of the contract and say, hey, I'm not going to move this until you correct the contract. If you do it multiple times, you can get in trouble and be banned from using the service. So even though your stuff isn't going to get stolen, you definitely want to make sure that your collateral is correct. Also, check it again after you buy it, because if you buy a whole bunch of items and you might happen to buy out the GDA and inflate the price, make sure that the price is correct. This is more for us. The reward is going to be a little bit higher for the jump freighters, and it also lets them know how much risk that they're taking on. If you list an item for 1 billion ISK collateral, but you're actually moving 10 billion ISK, the risk of being cargo scanned, although jump freighters, as long as you do everything correctly, the risk is very, very minimal. The more ISK that you have, the bigger of a target that you become. So just want to make sure that it's GDA plus 10%, and you should be good to go. When you're setting up the courier contract, in the options, instead of public, you're going to do private, and you'll type in Brave Little Toasters. If you type it in correctly, it'll pop up, and you want to make sure that you have the correct one. There we go. So make sure that you have the correct one, and make sure that they are blue to you. They are in a holding court or holding alliance that can't be war decked. But so you want to make sure that you're contracting to the correct person, otherwise it's not going to be able to be moved. We're not going to be able to see it. All right, so once you do that, your items are going to be delivered to GE, and then you're going to be able to list your market items. So like we said before, make sure that you're undercutting as small of an increment as possible to increase your profit. Keep track of the items that you're bringing in, keep track of your break-even point. Really recommend starting a spreadsheet for this. Small scale, you can do this all by hand, keep track of it, but the more that you do, start playing around with Google Sheets. There's some ESI data that you can bring in. I plan on doing a course on that eventually, on how to set up some basic Google Sheets. Keeping track of supply and demand. Also, spread out your risk. If you're starting out small, don't buy, if you have 100 million ISK, don't buy 50 energy neutralizers tying all your ISK up into a single item. Spread that out over multiple items. Bring in 10 of this, 10 of this, 10 of that. If you're starting out, buy items, ships that you want to fly. So if you want to fly in, Vexor Navy issues, bring in 3 of those and sell the other 2 to pay off your other 1. So that's something that you can do to start building up your wealth. And the more that you bring in, the more money that you make, the more that you can expand out. Other things to keep track of, if it is a level 1 module. So if it was a small energy neutralizer 1, local people can make that very easily. New bros can make that very easily. So there is a chance that if you were to bring this in, somebody could, with their own minerals, undercut you and remove all of your profit margin, and they can make a whole bunch of them, especially on the level 1 modules. So when you're bringing something in, really make sure you check that price history graph. One person can mess it up really, really bad for you really, really quickly. So kind of just keep track of that. If it's something that's easy to be made, there's a chance that somebody is going to make it easily, undercut it, all your profit margin is going to be gone, and then it's going to be sitting on the market for 80 days while somebody sells out 300 energy neutralizer ones. So with that being said, that's pretty much everything there is to bring in items into Catch. Just ways to just be in the game, pay attention to Slack, Mumble. People in voice chat are always in standing fleet like, hey, I want to fit up my ship, but I don't see any of this faction module. And just write that down and then just add it to your list, bring in a couple of them, see how they sell. Sometimes the items don't have a price history, right? So you're bringing in some sort of item and it's not going to have a price history, but I can almost guarantee you if I was to bring in this energy neutralizer 1 and have it constantly stocked, then there is going to be a demand for it because people are going to see that they can use it. Start small. If those sell out, bring in a little bit more. And then as you build up the demand, more people will buy it and you'll create a more market. Now, some other people might see that you have a good profit margin and start undercutting you, but that's just part of the game. Well, I hope everybody the best with bringing in all of their items and making a ton of ISK for very minimal time spent in game. This is a fantastic way to start small, build up. You can plex your accounts this way. Just be careful, spread out your risk. Like any investment, spread out your risk around. Use the Jump Freighter service. You can bring it in from HiSec, Head GP, but there are campers there all the time. I brought in billions of S through there, but I've also lost a whole bunch of stuff trying to get through there before I got my Jump Freighter. If you're doing this a lot, maybe look into creating your own hauling accounts. Have a HiSec alt that can fly deep space transport from JITA to Amar. Save that part of the trip from other people getting that money. Or have an alt train into Jump Freighters and then join Brave Little Toasters down the line. So thank you everybody for sticking through this class. And if you have any questions, my main and my name on Slack is going to be Tuex Panzer, Panzer. Otherwise, you can send an in-game mail to Tuex Importer. I'm pretty much always on that as well. Thank you everybody, and good luck.